Welcome to Sales Mavericks and Marketing Rebels, the show where bold business owners, savvy entrepreneurs, and sharp thought leaders push boundaries, challenge conventions, and redefine success in sales and marketing. And now your hosts, Nicholas Loise and Marco Salinas.
Hey there, it's Nicholas Loise, your host of the Sales Mavericks and Marketing Rebel podcast. I am with my co-host and back of the house shop, the great Marco. Marco is also runs Pina Colada Marketing and Pina Colada podcasts, and he is the host of this show as well as the person that makes everything happen. Listen, if you are looking to get a podcast going, and you should, if you are a business owner, if you're a sales maverick or a marketing rebel, you should be in the podcast space, and we're going to talk about why. And if you don't want to deal with all the headaches and do it all yourself, reach out to Marco, but most importantly, reach out to Pina Colada Marketing and Pina Colada Podcasts. They are the best in the business. They take care of everything that you need to have done, and just cool guys. You know they're cool because they have the name Pina Colada in their title. And anybody that has Pina Colada, tequila, bourbon, gin, you name it, in their title is all right by me. So grab your beverage of choice. It can be a pina colada, which I highly recommend you do because it's 5 o'clock somewhere, as the great Jimmy Buffett said.
That's right.
So grab your pina colada, grab your coffee, grab your Red Bull, grab your green tea, whatever you're going to have. Buckle in because this is our inaugural show. It's going to be fast and furious, but it's going to be fun. And thank you in advance for being part of our audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hey, good to have you here. I probably messed up 15 times on the name. I probably messed up 15 times on why we're doing this. But, you know, you do podcasts for the business. You are in the business of making podcast hosts really great. You and I are geeks on all things sales and marketing.
That's right.
We could talk about it all the time. So we said, why not just create a podcast and build a little community? Build a little community of Dan Kennedy heads, right? Dan heads, as I used to call them when I was at GKIC.
Yep.
Build a little community of renegade entrepreneurs, and talk to some of our friends and
Right.
talk to some of our new friends, right? And some old friends about marketing and sales. And so, you know, this is fun. So welcome aboard, Marco.
Thanks so much, Nick. No, that was an absolutely epic intro that you gave. And again, before we hit record, I was telling you there are no mistakes with podcasting. I mean, this is what one of my main reasons for loving this world is because people, consumers, business owners have kind of figured out, especially I think after COVID, Nick, that, you know, the media is not quite as truthful as we thought it once was, right?
Sure.
And people have really turned to podcasting for more honest, transparent, raw information. Not to say that there's not BS out there in the podcast world, but at least you got a chance, right? At least you got a chance of getting something real in the podcast world. Whereas when you're watching the news, you're just pretty much telling yourself, this is just a bunch of crap. This is a bunch of BS, man. And so podcasting has really given us that avenue, that channel to have our own voice, to have our own platform, you know, to be able to also, you know, sub down into the categories that we enjoy the most, right? That's the other beauty and benefit of podcasting is you can go pretty deep, you know, in your niche and the things that interest you. And so here we are, Sales Mavericks and Marketing Rebels, right? That's the name of the show. That's what we're talking about. That's who we're focusing on. The majority of people that know you, Nick, especially, as well as myself, all of us tend to spend at least a little bit of time studying these subject matters, right? Diving into this stuff because we actually care. We actually care about these matters. There's a lot of other business owners that kind of just do things maybe from their gut, and they don't really care to spend that time to learn. But that's not really the people that are in our network, is it?
No. And you know, it's interesting that you say that. If you think about a guy that we both love and really pour over all his body of work, which is Dan Kennedy, he, you know, his mantra is, you are not the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. You are the marketer of your business, right?
Yep.
So every business owner needs to have that let's call it switch. And, listen, quite frankly, people were going to pay homage to Dan because he's the best and the brightest in the business. And his body of work is one that, will stand the test of time. And that alone is worth kind of sitting some in and let it marinate a little bit. As a business owner, if you are not 24 hours a day thinking about sales and marketing, if you're not in that space or just absorbing that and looking at what's new, what's proven, right? What is working, you're behind. You're behind the eight ball.
That's
And
right.
as a business owner, as we start talking about, right, it's one of the genesis for Pina Colada Media is you should have podcasts, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about not just the podcast, but also utilizing YouTube and why, obviously we're a video-driven society, but really how to maximize a space that is, my prediction is it's going to blow up even more so.
Sure.
And Marco and his team know all things about podcasting. You just shared with me today that, yeah, sure, podcasts are on the Apple, right, the Spotify, the thousands of others, and I'm going to forget half of them. But really, where podcasts are being absorbed is they're being absorbed on YouTube.
That's right.
And if you talk to young and old, where do you go for information? Probably first is Google. Second is YouTube. Third is Amazon, right?
That's right.
And so I was talking to my dad about something. He's like, yeah, I'm going to YouTube it. Like, okay, 82 is the YouTubing it. Expect that for my 23-year-old daughter, right? But, so you got to be in it.
Right.
But, the one thing, I think you're of the belief, Marco, that everybody should have a podcast. Is that a fair statement? Every business owner should have a podcast?
I really do believe that. And I think that there is a podcast for every niche, for every business niche. I'm going to give a shout out to another great out in the media world. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And I subscribe to a lot of his beliefs as well. And he's one of the first ones that I heard, and he's always ahead of the curve. I heard him probably a decade ago talking about how every business needs a podcast, So he's always ahead of that stuff. And here we are 10 years later, and it's still extremely relevant. I think his case has been proven time and time over and over again. Now, one of the cool things, though, is that he's always mentioning that whatever your podcast is, make sure that you're not just only talking about your interest and what it is that you serve and what it is that you sell. Make sure that you broaden it a little bit and make it also about your guests. So that's going to be a big component of what we're doing here, Nick. We're going to invite, talented minds, smart entrepreneurs, people, again, that come from Planet Dan. And we want to hear their stories because one of the best things, I think you'll agree, Nick, is that every entrepreneur has a story, right? Everybody's story is a little bit different in this world. And, I'm just excited to be able to get these people on and learn from them and hear about their journey because, again, it's unique. Everybody's is unique, right?
I love it. I love listen, in less than 8 minutes, we've dropped Dan Kennedy, we've dropped entrepreneurship, we dropped Gary Vaynerchuk, right?
That's right.
And if you think about Crush It, which is first book, right? A lot of people, that's one of the best marketing books. And I remember it's probably on my bookshelf behind me. It is underlined, it is tagged, it was phenomenal. And I think he started out with Wine TV, and he gave the analogy, right, of selling a case of X amount of, let's say, at a Burgundy or Bordeaux, right? And he said, I could run an ad in the New York Times, right? I could get a billboard, and he cost the cost of it, or I could do one Twitter now X, excuse me, right? So one X post, and he said, here's the case study, and here's how many cases I moved at a part, and so it's just the power of social media, but also the importance of wine. His first channel was Wine TV, I believe. If
You got it right.
And and he used the power of this to sell product.
That's right.
And as a sales maverick and a marketing rebel, we salute our flag to that, and we like, that's awesome.
That's correct.
And that is such a thing. So here we are. We are gonna sing the praises of really smart entrepreneurs. We're gonna bring them on this show. Right, this is our first show just for you guys to get to know us.
Yep.
But we also has a good copywriter knows, and we always have been taught you have to have a good backstory, right? You have to have a good branding story. You have to have a good story of why you're doing what you're doing. And we got together and we love geeking out on all things sales and marketing. We love talking about it. And so we said, well, if we're doing it, let's bring some of our cool friends on. Let's learn from what's going on, best and the brightest. Let's pay homage to those of the past,
That's right.
that have got us here. And so we'll try to do as much as that as we possibly can. But also, really, as listeners, we want to provide you with huge value. And so it's something that we used to do all the time is we used to use the phraseology, what's working now? And this is going to be what's working now in marketing and in sales.
That's right.
And it really all starts with the marketing or the top of the funnel, if you will.
That's right.
And I think, and I'm going to go bold on this statement, Marco, is, I think nowadays when people hear the term marketing, they think tactical, right? They're good. They think SEO,
Right.
They, and they don't take a step back and think about the holisticness of the customer journey, right? Or the prospect journey. And really, what is your branding? And we're direct response marketing guys, listen. So that's the first and foremost with that. But, branding is a byproduct of really good communication.
That's right.
And really good positioning. And as a business owner, you got to do that and be thinking of that. Because if you don't do that, then it's a race to the bottom and it's all about price.
That's right.
If you're not differentiating yourself in the marketplace, and my guess is Pina Colada Media really focuses on, how do you deliver such a huge value and service to the marketplace that, price is of issue because of the fact that you take care of all these headaches that one has to do with doing a podcast. Because let's be honest, folks, if I didn't have Marco, I wouldn't get this going. Right. It's just too hard of work. I love it. I love doing this. I love teaching. I love creating an environment of really like-minded entrepreneurs and marketing experts and sales experts like we did at GKC and now we're doing here at this podcast. But I wouldn't do it because you need somebody to do all the back end stuff. And Pina Colada Media takes care of all that for us and takes care of all that for their customers because just creating the information is the easy part, right? Just doing this is fun, right? But getting it up on the YouTubes of the world and all the different things and branding it and putting it out and pushing it out.
That's right.
Is so important.
Yeah, no, you're right. And there's a lot of nitty gritty, Nick. There's a ton of steps. And that's where people burn out. And, there's a statistic that we throw out a lot is that the majority, I think 90% of podcasts only get to episode 7.
Really?
Only get to episode
Holy
7.
cow.
90% of it.
Our goal is 8, right? Once we go now, then it's all uphill, right? Or downhill from that. So they only get to 7. That's a fascinating stat.
That's right.
And how long is the right amount of time for somebody to have a podcast? What's the amount of listening time? What is the average listener?
It's usually somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes is that sweet spot for most people.
So like a TV sitcom, those that remember what a sitcom is now.
It's interesting though, because it's either one extreme or the other. You're either doing a short and sweet, Nick, or you're doing the Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast. It's one or the other. So, but generally speaking, people want to squeeze these things in if they're driving to the grocery store, if they're going for a jog. You can squeeze this in 30 minutes and you can get your value and you're in and then you're out, and so we try to follow that formula.
And what other tricks of the trade should a first-time podcast creator have up their sleeve?
Well, I think, again, one of the biggest issues is people want to make the show a little bit too much about themselves, right? So I'm a mortgage guy, right? And so then I've got the Mortgage Something podcast, and I just want to talk nonstop about mortgages. The majority of people are not going to want to just hear 24/7 nothing about mortgages, right? So that's where you should go a little bit more broad and you should make it more about the such and such business podcast, right? And you should bring in centers of influence onto your show that are in the business world. Now we have the luxury of niching down just a little bit with our sales and marketing topics here because the business owners that we know and that we want to invite on the show happen to also be big fans of the same material. So we've got a endless supply of people to talk about these things. But if you run an HVAC company, you're not going to want to just talk about how to fix the air conditioner every single week, right? People would get bored of that pretty quickly. They would tune out pretty quickly. So you got to be a little bit more creative, and you got to make sure that you're attracting people that that you can connect with and that you can network it with. I think that's the big thing, Nick. People don't realize what a great networking tool podcasting is. This is how you get in front of people. I think it's a lot better than going out to the old Wednesday night networking event downtown and what have you, because this is a lot more laser focused.
I agree. And think about it. We've all been trained personality and copy, right? So be yourself too, right? I assume is one thing, and kind of be real. And if you think about those networking things, they're just exhausting, right? And you end up with a pocket full of cards. And I listen, show me somebody that's actually written any business from one of those things. No, it's a great way to be out and about, right? And after, let's call it the post-COVID world, we're kind of tied into our inside. And so it was good to be out and about, and they're fun. And, I enjoy going to them, but, there's some interesting niche, let's call it networking businesses. If you ever studied that, I did a little study on that. There's some really big companies out there, or just some niche ones. There's two guys in Chicago that have now 7 different networking groups that they run, by topic.
Wow.
Cannabis, real estate, women entrepreneurs, small businesses, the general one. They've created such a business out of it. It is fascinating.
Wow.
And it goes back to what we talk about, right? Because we were talking about the name of the show. It's all about sales and marketing, right? So marketing rebels and sales mavericks, but we also want renegade entrepreneurs. We want people that are entrepreneurs. And to me, there is a difference between an entrepreneur and a small business person. An entrepreneur is crafty and is always coming up with different product lines and services and businesses to maybe sell to their entire, they kind of build up a little mini enterprise.
That's right.
And to me, that's the third leg of this stool. We can only have 2 legs, but the stool will tip over. So it's really all about small businesses or entrepreneurs that think renegadely about their sales and marketing, right? And that's how they get to their next level.
Hey, Nick, if you don't mind, let me jump in on this.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I really want to ask you this question. So I think all of us that were on Planet Dan, obviously we know that there were some big changes in that world. Dan almost lost his life, and then there was another big major buyout of the GKIC assets and the program and magnetic marketing and all that. And then a lot of people were saying, well, where did Nick go, man? Because Nick was my go-to guy. He was my sales guy. You were so heavily involved in that world, right? And you are still heavily involved in that world. And I know you've probably had some one-on-one conversations with a lot of people. You probably bumped into some here and there, but can you get us up to speed on what is Nick Loise up to these days? I happen to know that you've got something called Sales Performance Team that you're working on. That's your big project right now. Can you tell us a little bit more about life after GKIC and what you're doing with Sales Performance Team?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for that question. Yeah, so obviously, loved every minute I was there. And while I was there, we created a you could kind of see 2 of the programs above my head there, which was No BS management of a sales team, as well as sales mastery. And we also at GKC kind of created a, looking at your sales processes and systems as a business owner, right? Because the world of marketing is one thing, but it's part of the equation. The other part of the equation, to get the money into the proverbial cash register, you need a sales process and systems. And we used to do a lot of work with some of the members on helping them create their sales process and systems. And so I kind of just spun off after GKC and after Dan had gotten better, right? I didn't want to bounce out of there while Dan was sick, and I kind of just wanted to make sure that the place was in good standing. I had 8 years of my life there. I created by demand, because people were asking for it, a company that was Sales Performance Team. And basically what we do is we go inside and help small businesses and entrepreneurs either create their sales playbooks, create their sales processes and systems, or at the highest level, help them manage their sales teams. Because a lot of times sales is a dirty word in the organization, though they need it. People don't like managing sales teams, and you really have to do that. So I have a team. I have a team that helped me I have coaches that work with salespeople and listen to sales calls and give feedback. I have an outsourced team in the Philippines that a lot of times we do reactivation campaigns for past customers or lead generation or whatever it is, get people to events. And so I do a lot of work with past and present members of the magnetic marketing world, the GKIC world, as well as new friends, right, and new customers. But it's really all about how to help people get to their next level, which is really putting systems and process in place and having really, really, really data-driven sales teams to help them grow their business. And that's what we do. And we love it. We have a lot of fun. We're starting to get into some other things. The company first started where I thought I was just going to be helping people write their sales playbook. It quickly morphed into more. We also did some outsource selling. That is kind of a product line that we bounce back and forth and only do that for very specialized people and friends of the family, if you will.
Okay.
But we are starting to get more involved in helping entrepreneurs and small business people do recruit salespeople. That's actually a fast growing business line with us because listen, the average sales recruiter is just throwing candidates down your throat. We take a more holistic approach and make sure that A, they can sell, B, they can sell in your environment, and we'll stick around and help you.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. Thank you for that. And its sales performance team is our thing. And you listen, go online and sign up for all of our goodies. We wouldn't be a good GKIC marketer if we didn't give away a lot of free stuff and a lot of good content. And it's a good way to start the conversation.
That's
but
right.
Thanks for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So hopefully the people know, no, I'm still around. I still love the place. Still wave the flag of Dan. You can see, got a picture of Dan and I behind, got the Dan Kennedy bobblehead, the no BS stuff. So it's all there, right? It's all, still got 365. You can look around my office and, the binders. I was a student first and foremost and a practitioner. So the binders are all still around here, and you name it, I got it. We were joking about, go in my basement and go in my garage, and I haven't digitized anything yet. It's still in binders and it's still in paper.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I'm going to follow that up with my own personal experience with you, Nick. Is that when I was on really heavily active with GKIC before the buyout, I kind of feel like those are a little bit more of the glory days because we were, it wasn't quite so big yet, and it was just kind of all the diehards, just kind of that small collective group that was just really all about the Dan Kennedy stuff, and it just felt like our little corner of the world. But any experiences and interactions that I ever had with you were always just top notch, man. I mean, you took great care of myself, and I'm sure that anyone and everyone that knows you will feel the exact same way. I always felt like Nicholas Loise was kind of that hidden gem within the organization. You're a low key guy. You are a pretty low key guy, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a absolute ton of knowledge. And again, you got such a great experience, Nick. You got to rub shoulders with some of the best, right? You were like a sponge around the greats, and
well, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm humble, right? I'm firstborn, right, and Catholic, so I'm humble, right? But keep going.
No, but yeah. So I mean, that's just the general thing. I want to really point out that your knowledge and everything that you're bringing to this podcast is really, it's extremely valuable. And so anybody that knows you already loves you because you've always conducted yourself so well. And that was my personal experience, again, as just a regular old, gold or diamond member of GKIC. And so I'll give myself a pat on the back by saying I felt like I won in finding you and really, seeking you out, because you are one of those that's very low key, but your value that you bring is immense. And so I'm very humbled myself and grateful that you and I are working on this project together.
Well, thank you. You're very kind and you're very gracious with your praise. And I was thinking, you said I was a hidden gem. Well, we're going to have to reach out to Mike Stodola, who was the jewel of GKIC, right? And get him on the podcast at some point. But It was a great team. The beautiful thing was we had great members. We had great customers. We had a great team, right? Darcy, one of the smartest people, Dave Deep, a phenomenal person, Mike Stodola. Oh my gosh, that guy is a marketing genius. I had great salespeople, right? So as a sales leader, that's 99.9% of your battle is getting really good talent. So I had a great sales team. We had a great customer service team. We had some of the best product producing people in the world, with this first one being Dan Kennedy. So
That's right.
it was, thank you for that. And it's still going, right? I think they're doing a great job, introducing it and growing it. And,
That's right.
it's, different approaches, different places of time. We were owned by a private equity group for the majority of my time there, right? So that's got conflicting desires, right? So
Ideologies.
that,
Yeah.
ideologies, right? And maybe we'll do an episode of now that you got some distance, what would I have done differently? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of really good marketing and business ideas that I think, now that I think about it, and I've shared those publicly, things I would have done differently. So that's a great episode that we'll do one time. But listen, it's still going strong. You really good entrepreneurs that have been birthed from it, I
That's
think,
right.
right? And that was always my favorite of the. And you think about yourself, you haven't always been in Pina Colada media.
That's right.
So you've had a couple different adventures of your life. So that's a typical entrepreneur, right?
That's right.
You create different ventures based on what the market is asking for, and you're seeing. And we're so thankful to have Pina Colada Media as part of us and producing this phenomenal show for us and helping us get it off the ground and running. And who do you like to work with at Pina Colada Media?
So that's a great question as well, Nick. And again, I appreciate the plug. Yeah. We're looking for businesses that want to differentiate. A lot of the people that we've been working with are in industries that don't typically have a podcast, actually. So the great majority of podcast production companies that are out there, they all seem to go after people that are in the tech space.
Sure.
I've got a little tech startup and I want to get the name out there. But then it kind of starts going back to the stuff that Dan talks about, where too many people are just all doing the exact same thing, right? A big part of what I learned from Dan was to really just try to go against the grain and be different. And so we tend to look for businesses where they don't necessarily always have a podcast in that particular niche. And so now they're the only ones in that environment that are putting out content and doing something a little bit different and a little bit unique like that. So that's always fun. But it's not to say, of course, that we don't still work with, thought leaders and entrepreneurs and brand builders and these people out here that are authors and doing big things in the marketing world. They tend to just kind of already understand that you need a podcast. You really do. And in those cases, it's more of, well, let me just take all the annoying and boring stuff off of your hands, right? And so we jump in and we take over those tasks. But I'm really trying to find businesses that are not really in the tech space, so Main Street businesses that are out there, or again, other smart marketers that know that there's value in producing content, putting content out there. And if you don't mind, Nick, just a quick story on the Pina Colada name,
Please.
if you don't mind. I developed that after listening to the song. We all know the song, right?
Gotcha.
It's a really important song, and I've always loved it. And I'm paying.
Well, give us the name of the song, because I might have a different one. I'm like, do you like Pina Coladas is the one that I'm thinking
The
of.
song is actually
But is
called
that the song?
believe it or not, it's called Escape. That's the name of the song. But
Okay.
everybody knows it as the Pina Colada song, right? But
Okay.
there's almost a moral to that story. If you pay attention to the story, the couple had really grown apart. And the husband ends up putting out an ad in the paper, and he's looking for this dream woman of his. And do you like pina coladas, and having walks on the beach and doing all these things, right? And then the long story short is that he finds a woman, they meet up, and it ends up being his own wife. And so
Okay.
what's the story there is that you've got a lot of value right next to you, but you've got to make sure that you're paying attention to it and nurturing it, right? Otherwise, you could have your dream person right there by your side, and you're imagining somebody else out there and not even realize what's right there by your side. And I feel like that applies to businesses more than ever, because my number one thing with businesses is that they want to focus on buying and finding a new client. and they don't nurture their own existing client list. That's who they ignore. And that's where I kind of pulled that in from the Pina Colada story. I call it the Pina Colada principle now, which is that don't forget to give attention to the person that you've already committed to, which is your existing client. And when you have a podcast like this, the first thing you can do is to start taking this content and dripping it out to your existing client list, right? That's the very first thing you should do, is let your own people know that this is what you're doing and stay in front of them. So that's kind of the general idea. And that's where I pulled in some of the Dan Kennedy marketing stuff into what we're doing with the podcasting. Is it's just a great resource to create content and make sure that you use that content to repurpose it into emails, into newsletters, and then the actual video itself and audio itself to stay in front of your existing list, as well as to put it out there to find new people as well.
Love that. Love that song. I mean, who is, I mean, that's a
It's a classic
70s song. It's a yacht rock song, right? A boat rock song,
That's
whatever
right.
they call it nowadays. And who doesn't love that song, and who, didn't love the ending of that. And there are those that are going to be listening to this maybe a little younger than us, right? So there was a thing that was called a newspaper, and that's where you put ads out to find somebody. Nowadays it's Tinder and it's other things.
That's right.
But that was how they did it. And then there was Craigslist. So, well, my friend, I learned from the best, and you're one of the best. You said keep it under 30 minutes. We're at that 30-minute mark. Once again, we want to thank you for everything that you do. We want to thank our sponsor, which is Pina Colada Media, which you just heard the backstory for and the genesis story for. So any good marketer needs to have a branding story. Pina Colada Media has one of the best. If you want to learn more about us, please go to online to pinacoladamedia.com. If you want to learn a little bit more about Sales Performance Team,
That's right.
hit us up at salesperformanceteam.com. We will see you on the next show, folks.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to Sales Mavericks and Marketing Rebels. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Keep pushing the limits in your business. And remember, the Mavericks and Rebels are always ahead of the game. Catch you next time.